Hello Yarny friends, welcome to Grey Crochet. Today we're going to be reviewing an amigurumi pattern book. It is going to be a review of Dinosaurs, Mammoths and More Prehistoric Amigurumi. Look how cute these guys are. There are 14 patterns in this book, which you can see back here. This is the only place where you can see all of the patterns together. There isn't a larger version within the book, unfortunately, but when you go to the respective patterns, you can see larger images of each one. But here's all of them together. That's like a little saber-toothed tiger. That's a caveman from the front of the book, along with a T-Rex. That's a little cave woman, a dodo, Loch Ness monster. There are so many cute patterns in this. So 14 patterns by 10 different designers. So some designers have multiple patterns in this book, but for the most part, it's just like 1 or 2 patterns per designer. Now, because this book is written by multiple different designers, there is a bit of a sizing issue, which I guess is not really like an issue, but if you've made patterns from other books where there's just one creator, all of the patterns tend to come out like a general size. For example, all of the Peekaboo books are pretty like large to medium size characters, whereas with this book, because they're written by different creators who have different styles, these patterns can come out at varying sizes. For example, this T-Rex, which is the size of my face, if you can see him, he's so cute. He is the largest pattern in the book. This dodo, also the size of my face, but a lot smaller, is actually the smallest pattern in the book. And if you look at them side by side, although they're generally the same tallness, this guy could probably fit into the T-Rex's leg. Like, that's how small this one is compared to this. So this obviously uses a lot more yarn and stuffing compared to this guy. And if, for example, you were making these to gift to like 2 kids part of the same family, and you didn't know that there was a size difference, this might cause a bit of an issue. They might want the bigger one, but I guess not like that big of a deal. Just something to keep in mind, that because there's different pattern designers, the patterns turn out different sizes as well. So the patterns are marked from 1 to 3 stars. So 1, I believe, is an easy pattern, 2 is intermediate, and 3 is advanced. Now the book doesn't actually list the patterns in order of difficulty, so there's like level 3 patterns or 3-star patterns mixed in with like 2-star and 1-star patterns. When I show you all of the creations that I've made, I will list them in order of difficulty. So I'll do the 1-star patterns first, the 2-star patterns next, and then the 3-star patterns towards the end. But this book is generally easy to follow along, in my opinion. It is beginner friendly. There are a few techniques or stitches that I hadn't done before this book, but the start of the book actually goes through all the stitches, as well as like things like what crochet hooks to use with what type of yarn. So if you are a beginner, you can give that beginning part of the book a read. They also have QR codes next to each of the stitch tutorials that they have, which is like just pictures of the stitches really and a description of what to do. But if that does not help you, they have a QR code that you can scan and then get video tutorials as well, which is really helpful. They also have QR codes next to each of the patterns, so you can scan it and look at what other creators have made. If you make one of these patterns, you can actually post your picture online as well. And I think that's just a great way to get ideas of what colors to use if you don't like the colors that they use in this book, for example, to get inspiration from what other people have used. And it's just really fun way to see other people's creations as well. So that's really great. The one thing that I do not like about this book is that it requires a lot of sewing. So I don't necessarily like sewing. I would much rather crochet than stitch things together. There is a lot of sewing in this book. When I show you all of the patterns, I will tell you how many parts there were to sew together as well, just so you know. But if you don't like sewing, or if you prefer patterns that are no sew or minimal sew patterns, this book isn't for you. So run away. But if you don't mind it, go for it, because they do turn out really cute. I will also tell you how many grams of yarn I've used for these patterns. I wish I could tell you how many meters I've used, but unfortunately one of the brands of yarn that I used for these ones didn't actually have like the measurements on it. Like it didn't tell you how many yards or meters within a ball, so I couldn't actually work that out, unfortunately. But I will tell you how many grams I've used, which might not be 100% accurate. So I've used acrylic DK weight yarn. If you use like a cotton or a different blend or a thinner or thicker yarn, that's going to change. I also use the yarn under technique, also known as the X stitch, which basically creates tighter stitches for amigurumi. That uses less yarn as well. So if you just use the traditional yarn over method, you might use a little bit more yarn as well. So definitely just use it as a guide. Don't take it like on face value, because it could change depending on what yarn or stitch you're using, and your tension as well, the hook size, many different things. I did use a 3mm hook with all of these patterns. I think at one point I did use a 2.5mm hook because my old 3mm hook broke. But most of these patterns are made with a 3mm hook, so that also plays into effect with how much yarn is used. Anyways, enough of blabbering along. Let me show you all of the patterns. The first one-star pattern I've got to show you is Iggy the Baby Iguanodon by MJ Carlos, who also goes by the handle Hello Yellow Yarn. I used 62 grams of yarn to make him and sewed 18 pieces together. There is an optional 19th piece to sew together if you wanted to sew the top of the eggshell to his head to sort of make it stay in place. I didn't do that, so I've only stitched 18 pieces together. I do agree that he is a one-star pattern, except for the fact that the eggshell uses picot stitches. Now I consider myself a beginner and I had never done a picot stitch before, so maybe it requires a 2-star level, just because it does require a stitch that most, I guess, beginners might not know. Something else that I found confusing with the picot stitches that I used in the eggshell is the pattern says to chain 2 and then work the stitch. However, the beginning of the book and the video that they link you to learn how to do the picot stitch says to chain 3. So I found that a bit confusing, but apart from that, he was pretty easy to make. The pattern did suggest to use pipe cleaner in the tail, because when you do try and fit him in, I just use stuffing in this case. It's probably easier if his tail sort of goes like that, which pipe cleaner would help it go like that. I've just used stuffing so it sort of sticks out. But yeah, apart from that, like, that's my fault for stuffing the tail and not using pipe cleaner because I didn't have any. But yeah, that's something that you could do if you wanted to, otherwise it works just fine. One thing I did wish for this pattern, which is just a personal preference, is the top of the eggshell is way smaller than the bottom of the eggshell. I thought it might have been cool if potentially they were the same size, so when you're not using it, you could sort of cover it like a lid. And then that's just a personal preference. I know a really big eggshell might look really strange at the top of his head like that, and eggshells do break apart into multiple pieces, but I don't know, I just thought it might be functional that way instead of just popping it in here. But yeah, he's a very cute little pattern. The second one-star pattern I've got to show you is Martin the Paleosaurus by Susana Villalobos, who also goes by the handle Conmus Manus. I apologize if I'm saying that incorrectly. I used 64 grams of yarn to make him, and then there were 16 pieces to sew together. Now the tail and the head is actually worked all in one piece, so the 16 pieces that you need to sew are just these 4 flippers, as well as all of the spots. So if you didn't want the spots, it would only really be, I guess, 4 pieces to sew together, which is the flippers. So it doesn't seem like much. The pattern did suggest using pipe cleaner for the neck. Now again, I did not have pipe cleaner, so I just stuffed it. With the stuffing, it still sort of stays up, but pipe cleaner would definitely be recommended, because then you could move his head into all sort of fun patterns. With stuffing, it doesn't really cooperate like that. But yeah, I definitely agree with the 1-star rating. It is very easy to do, and I love the fact that it was all worked in one piece. It made it sort of fun, and if you wanted to turn this into a minimal sewing pattern, you definitely could. This little guy is Toby the Stegosaurus by Mariska Vos-Bowman, who also goes by the handle DIY Fluffies. He's another 1-star pattern. I used 53 grams of yarn to make him, and then there were 26 pieces to sew together, which is mostly these spots here and all of the spikes on his back. Apart from that, there's just the 2 eyelets that you need to sew on, and then the 4 legs. Now this guy's head and body is worked in one piece, and when I was making him, I found the eye placement from the pattern to be incorrect. I'm not sure why. I'm pretty sure I did follow the pattern exactly as it was. Maybe the creator uses the yarn over method versus the yarn under, but it just looked very wrong to me. So the yarn over method creates more of a slant in stitches versus the yarn under method, which uses the X stitch, sort of creates the stitches more in line, if that makes sense. So that could have very well played a factor into why my eyes weren't lining up. But basically, once I got to this hump part, my eyes were sort of like that. So the hump was like facing not up top, if that makes sense. So I did have to rework the eyes and sort of just wing its placement. That was the main issue with this pattern. I didn't really have a struggle with anything else. It was sort of annoying to sew all of these close together, but again, if you don't mind sewing, you might not find that to be a problem. This guy is Oscar the Saber-Toothed Tiger, also by DIY Fluffies. I used 95 grams of yarn to make him, and had to sew together a whopping 43 pieces, which is the most in the entire book. I know it doesn't look that way, but all of these little paw pads and toe pads needed to be sewn on individually, as well as all of the little toes. So for example, in one leg, I needed to sew the leg to the body. I needed to sew this pad, so that's 2. Then I need to do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in one leg, there's 8 pieces of sewing required. Now the sewing that I mentioned in this video does not include all of these markings, or like if there's anything under the eyes or eyebrows or anything like that. It's just pieces needed to be sewn together. So there is quite a bit of sewing required in this pattern. I definitely think the pattern could have been simplified. For example, you could have started in white yarn and then moved on to yellow for both the toes and then the legs. That will cut down quite a bit of sewing. So if you are making this pattern, that's just something to keep in mind if you despise sewing. But I do sort of agree with the 1-star rating. This guy is marked as an extra star in brackets. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's because of these French knots, which are, I guess, a more advanced technique compared to what beginners might know. This was the first time that I've had to do French knots. It was pretty easy to learn, and the beginning of the book does tell you how to do this. One thing with the pattern, it doesn't tell you if the little toes here need stuffing. The pictures from the book does look like it was stuffed, so I did stuff it, and I think that was the right choice, because if it wasn't stuffed, it might be very like squishy. The snout was a bit confusing. I'm not sure if I was just misreading the pattern, but I did struggle a bit and had to freehand what I did to connect these guys. And the pattern book does have 360 photos of this guy, which is really good because you do have to sew in the markings on the back and on the side and on the head. So the book did really well with showing you 360 photos, so you could then mark the stitches where you needed to. It also sort of told you where exactly you needed to mark the markings. So it was very well explained, but yeah, except for the little toes not telling you whether it needed to be stuffed or not. This adorable lady is Petra the Pterodactyl by Carolyn Brody, who also goes by the name DIY Fluffies. I used 101 grams of yarn to make her, and then there were 16 pieces needed to be sewn together. I'm not sure if you could tell from the front, but these wings are actually 3 different parts that you then sew together, with the little wing pieces in the front and the long wing. She is marked as a 1/2-star pattern. I did not have any troubles making her. I sort of agree with the 1-star rating. Perhaps the 2-star was because you do have to do some intricate shaping, like for example the feet are triangular, the face is quite unique, but the pattern is very well described. I had no troubles making her at all. You will just obviously need to know how to work flat patterns as well. So if you started with amigurumi as a crocheter, you just need to know how to crochet flat pieces as well. But apart from that, I think it's a very simple pattern. I had no issues at all. I absolutely love this one. It's my favorite pattern in the book, and I will remake her 1,000 times over if I wanted to. She is so cute. I just love her little face. It's so adorable. This guy is Brad the Brachiosaurus by Marja Hansen. He is marked as a 2-star pattern. I used 48 grams of yarn to make him, and there's only 6 pieces to sew together, which is actually the lowest number of pieces required in this book. So he is fairly cute. I'm not entirely sure why it's marked as a 2-star pattern. I did not have any trouble with this one. I thought it was relatively easy, but the tail is crocheted into the body, so maybe if you haven't done, you know, crocheting pieces into each other before, you might find that a bit confusing. Now, one thing about the tail when you make it ends in 24 stitches. But when you connect it to the body, it connected in 2 different rows, I'm pretty sure. But adding them up together, it only came up to 22 stitches. So I did find that a bit confusing because it was sort of like 2 stitches from the tail weren't sewn into the body. So I did sort of have to freehand that a little bit. I'm not sure if I did something wrong with the pattern, but I reread it a few times and I just do not understand where the extra 2 stitches went, so I just ended up crocheting them into the body. Now, because I did not read the pattern properly again, I did end up sewing this guy's head onto his neck before I put on the turtleneck. The turtleneck actually requires you to slip it on over the head and then put on the head, like stitch him on. So I just modified the pattern a little bit by just crocheting basically a flat piece and then connecting it at the back here. So I did not follow the turtleneck exactly as the pattern said, but it pretty much works the same. She tells you to sew the turtleneck in, so it is sort of like a real turtleneck. It's really cute. You can actually like pull it down as well. She does recommend putting pipe cleaner or wire in the neck to sort of keep it up. If you did have pipe cleaner, you could probably move his neck around. I just stuffed it really firmly and it works fine. So yeah, absolutely no complaints about this pattern. I would definitely make it again. As mentioned before, there's only 6 pieces to sew together. So if you don't really like sewing, this pattern is a great way for you to make something out of this book. The next 2-star pattern is Paula the Parasaurolophus, which is a bit of a tongue twister to say, and her little Stegosaurus teddy. This one is also by Marja Hansen. I used 70 grams of yarn to make her, and then there were 13 pieces to sew together, which excludes sewing her teddy to her arm. I just did that to sort of keep it together, but if you did want to do that as well, that's 14 pieces to sew together. I'm not really sure why it's a 2-star rating. I found it pretty easy. My guess would be you sort of have to work the toes, or the fingers, sorry, into the hand, like you've got to crochet it together, if that makes sense. It is a bit more fiddly to do compared to, I guess, just doing like a simple foot like this, but I didn't really have any troubles making her. The pattern did suggest using either like pipe cleaner or metal in the arms, or when connecting the neck to the head. I do understand the neck to the head situation because it's quite a big head, and the amount of stuffing in there can be quite heavy. I just stuffed the body really firmly so the head doesn't droop down, but you definitely could do that if you're worried about the head drooping down. And then you could also add, I guess, pipe cleaner into the hands. You could move it around. I didn't do anything. I just left it unstuffed, and it seems to work fine. So yeah, no complaints. I didn't find anything difficult in this pattern. It's just a pretty cute pattern. This is Peaches the Triceratops by Irene Strange. I used 45 grams of yarn to make her, which is actually the least amount of yarn I've used to make any of these little dinosaurs. And there were 11 parts to sew. The pattern did suggest using a piece of foam to put back here, like foam cut into the little spikes, like a shape of spikes, just to keep this a bit firmer. I did not have that, so I just sort of stuffed it, which if you can see, it's not very flat. So if you did want, I guess, more definition in the spikes, that's something that you can do. I didn't do that. I didn't really find anything too difficult with the pattern. My guess for why this has this two-star rating would be the bobble stitches, which I guess is a more advanced stitch. But she was fairly easy to do from memory. The area where she asked me to sew the little mouth onto looked a bit incorrect. Now it could just be me doing X stitch versus the traditional yarn over, which, as I mentioned before, creates more straighter stitches, I guess, compared to the traditional yarn over, which bends a bit more. But yeah, like I just freehanded the mouth, and I didn't really have too much trouble with the pattern. She's very cute and tiny. This guy is Albert the Longish Groomer by Ophelia Lodge, who also goes by a hooker. I used 77 grams of yarn to make him, and then there were 15 pieces to sew together. This is a two-star pattern, which is an intermediate pattern, and I sort of agree with that just because I found the feet sort of annoying to do, and there's quite intricate shaping. Now, if you don't like sewing or crocheting in actually small things together, you're gonna hate doing this pattern. As much as I hated doing it, my hands were killing me, and that's because these little toes are crocheted together, so you can make them individually and then crochet it onto the leg, but the toes are only 4 stitches long when you end up fastening them off, and so to work into those 4 stitches for each of the toes, I just found it really difficult to do. And my hands were just killing me. Like I literally had to do each leg over a different day just because of how tedious I found the experience to be. But that's just a personal thing. Some people are really good at crocheting small or narrow things. I personally am not. My hands hate me for it. So if you dislike that, definitely just maybe you could potentially sew the little toes in. It might give it a different look. It might not be as, I guess, clean as this, but I do like the way she sort of shaped the leg. It's very interesting. I've never seen that done before. It's just very cute. But yeah, apart from that, I didn't really struggle with anything in the pattern. It is quite interesting, all of her techniques that she used in it, like there's like little spikies there. I'm not sure if you can see it. It just adds a little bit of extra character as there's color changes. And then yeah, as I mentioned before, I really like the way that she's shaped the feet to sort of make them bent. It's really cute. The last two-star pattern is Dodo Dominique by Marielle Del Mosso, who also goes by a Mongo Redo. I used 46 grams of yarn to make this guy, and then there were 17 pieces to sew together. I found the feet really annoying, similar to the previous pattern. These little toes here are quite narrow to work into, and I just don't like working into narrow things, so I did find that a bit annoying to do, and I don't think it is a pattern that I will redo, just for that fact, because my hands were killing me while I was making it. But I do like the way it's constructed. I'm not sure if it's potentially just an opinion thing or if I've done something wrong, but I feel like this beak area extends too far. It could just be me, but yeah, he is pretty cute, and I didn't really have any difficulties with him. It's just my, I guess, tension is causing these tail feathers to curve. I'm not really sure if there's a way to fix that, but it is a cute pattern nonetheless. Yeah, and he's quite tiny as well. The first 3-star or advanced pattern I've got to show you is Gabby the Cave Girl by Leah Ajono. The next 2 patterns I'm going to show you are also by the same pattern creator. I used 84 grams of yarn to make her, and then there were 22 pieces to sew together. She is absolutely adorable. I love all the things that make her look like a traditional cave girl. It sort of reminds me of the Flintstones. She's got a little tooth necklace and the bone in her hair. It's so cute. I actually love the way that the hair turned out. It's so interesting. I love it. My guess on why this would be 3-star is the hair. If you ever have worked hair, it is quite tedious. But apart from that, I found the pattern pretty simple. Now, one thing with the hair, I'm not sure if I've just misinterpreted this, but all of this designer's patterns, when it comes to the hair, I just found the rounds that she talks about a little bit confusing. The first time I did it, I hadn't had any coffee yet, so I had to read it a couple of times to understand it. But basically, how the hair works is you kind of work a flat piece, and with some of them, you work in the front loop only, which then leaves the back loop for you to then add the hair strands onto. Now, the first round obviously is a magic circle, and then you start working the back, the front loop only, so you leave the back loop for the hair. But in all of her patterns, for example, the very central part of her hair is called rounds 1 and 2. So she's like, you work the hair into rounds 1 and 2. Or the back loop only, sorry, of rounds 1 and 2. But round 1 was a magic circle, so at first I was like, wait, hang on, was I supposed to leave a back loop when I was doing the magic circle? And I did like question whether I had done that correctly. But yeah, it might have just been, I don't know, a typo potentially. But it's pretty easy to work out. I mean, you sort of know what area she's talking about when she talks about the hair. Apart from that, I found the wheels a little bit overcomplicated for this little dino toy. I feel like it could have been made a bit simpler because it is so small and it's so fiddly. Definitely could have been made simpler in my opinion. So how the wheels are worked is you make a back piece and then a lighter front piece. And because it's so tiny, I feel like you could have just maybe changed, I'm sorry, I'm not sure why it's turning out so bright on my camera. You could have potentially just changed colors and then continued on to make it a little bit larger, to make it look like 2 colors, instead of working 2 separate pieces which you then have to sew together. With the sewing as well, she mentions the back piece, the darker piece, you sort of fasten it off and weave in the ends, and you use the inner smaller piece to then sew it onto the larger piece and then sew it onto the body. I'm fairly sure I did read that correctly in the book. I did attempt to do that, and it looked very messy to me because the lighter yarn, you could sort of see it, like there's one part there where you could see it. I ended up going over it with the darker yarn and just stitching the back part of the wheel into the body with the darker yarn, so it looked a little bit less messy. It might just be me doing something like this for the first time that caused it to look so messy, but I definitely think, like, if you want to cut out 4 pieces to sew, you can just sort of work the magic circle and then just do some additional stitches in a different color to make it look like, you know, a wheel, like 2 different colors. But yeah, it's a pretty simple pattern otherwise, in my opinion. I didn't really have too much issue with it. But yeah, she looks very cute in her little dress, the little dino toy. She's adorable. One thing I did forget to mention about this designer's patterns is I actually like the way that she did the arms. So the way that she's done the arms, you can actually move them around if you wanted to. And the other 2 patterns that I'll show you shortly from the same designer basically have the same detail. For the cave boy, it's the hands that move, and for the mammoth, it's both the legs and the arms that you can sort of move around, just because of the way that she's told you to stitch it on. I just thought that was genius. I'd never seen it done before in all of the other patterns that I've made. But yeah, it just adds a bit of character to this one. It's really adorable. Dave the Cave Boy is next, also by the same creator. Apologies if you can't see the hair against my background, it is black. I used 80 grams of yarn to make him, and there were 6 pieces to sew together, which does not include sewing the wheel to his hand. I just sort of did that to keep it all attached so I could show it to you. But yeah, he's very cute. The way that the donut wheel thing was made, I found could have maybe been simplified. I'm not really sure. I sort of struggled to put the center part in, if that makes sense. Like you crochet it out and you push it in. I struggled with that after I'd already stuffed it, so I tried unstuffing it and then like doing it again. I have made other donut patterns before that I found a little bit easier, so maybe that could have been simplified. I'm not sure. Maybe it was just me struggling with a new technique. Potentially, that's more likely it. But yeah, apart from that, he isn't too hard to make. The hair strand rounds, as mentioned in the last one, are a bit like off. Their numbers aren't quite right, but you can sort of work it out. He even has a bag with 2 little rocks inside. It's really cute. Like, it's the detail that she puts into these patterns is adorable. I absolutely love her. The pants are removable if you wanted to do that as well, as with the dress and the cave girl. So, you know, you could make multiple pants, I guess, and have like a little dress up party if you wanted to. It's really adorable. I love it. This next guy is Max the Mammoth, also by the same designer. I used 103 grams of yarn to make him, and there were 17 pieces to sew together, excluding this little berry that I've stitched onto his arm. I just sort of put it on this so I can show you guys easily. You don't have to stitch it on there, but if you wanted to, that would be 18 stitches. I think he is so cute the way he turned out. Similar to the previous 2 patterns, the hair rounds are a little bit, the numbers that she uses on them are a little bit off. And apart from that, I did find the eye a little bit confusing. So how the eyes are worked is you start with the black bit and you sort of do multiple increases together to sort of make it oval. And then you skip a few stitches and add on the blue. Now the number of stitches that you skip depend on whether you're doing the left eye or the right eye. And for some reason, I'm not sure if it was just me, I did try redoing the right eye a couple times, but it just came out looking wrong. I sort of got it here. I'm not really sure if you can tell very clearly, but because you sort of skip a different number of stitches to the right one, you sort of end up in a different part of the black, and because the black is a bit oval in shape, it just looked wrong to me. Like, it looked really chunky, the blue. I tried to redo it again, but it did not work. It turned out pretty much the same as this. I didn't really like the look of that compared to the left eye, which, if I can get my camera to focus, you can see. This is the left eye versus how the right eye turned out. The right eye, in my opinion, is a bit messier. So what I ended up doing is just making another left eye and then turning it inside out. So this is actually the wrong side. And then just stitching it onto the white. Now, again, you could simplify this if you did not like sewing, and instead of creating a separate white, you could just add an extra round of white around it, I guess, to make it bigger. But if you don't mind sewing, you can just stick with the pattern as is. I think it's so cute. I love that she added in a little strawberry detail, which actually includes like a little leaf as well. So cute. The thought that she put into this pattern is great. Look how cute he turned out. This chunky guy is Theo the T-Rex by Sarah Obendale. I used 142 grams of yarn to make him, and there were 20 pieces to sew together. He used the most amount of resources out of any of the other characters in this book, 142 grams, as I mentioned earlier, and quite a bit of stuffing. So he is actually quite heavy compared to the other ones, but he's so adorable. I love how he turned out. He is huge. For reference, that's my hand. So he's about like 1.5 hands, I would say, tall, and maybe like 2 hands wide. from tail to toe. He's really big, he's adorable. Look how cute his little teeth are, it's so adorable. I have no complaints about this pattern. I'm not really sure why it was marked as a 3-star. Could have been 2 in my opinion. My guess for the complexity would be these bobble stitches for the nose, if my camera wants to focus. The nose has bobble stitches, and you've also got to work the eyelid onto the eye, which I guess requires some technique, but I had no trouble with making him. He was very simple to make and he turned out absolutely adorable. I hope you enjoyed that review of Dinosaurs, Mammoths and More Prehistoric Amigurumi. I will put the link of the book in the description box below if you're interested in purchasing it. If you would like to see any other book reviews in future, please let me know. If you haven't already checked out my amigurumi book tag video, please check that one out as well. I've put it in the description box below. But basically I'll be making all of the patterns from those books that I have mentioned in that video and releasing them. If there's any more that you want to see, let me know. Also let me know if there's anything that I didn't talk about in this video that you want to know out of a pattern book review, just so I can take it into account for the next video that I post. Thank you so much for watching this. I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.